I say welcome. It's not really for me to welcome you. Some of you have heard this kind of spiel already, but if you're new here, I should just start by explaining a little bit about this place, because it's a bit confusing. So my name is Charles. I'm one of 3 chaplains based here at the university. We are employed by the university, or half by the university, half by some of the local churches. Is this kind of moving up? I know I need to do that bit there, or something like that. Or just stand further back. Oh, that one there. Fantastic, thank you very much. So the university employs 3 chaplains from different church backgrounds, and we work here kind of full-time, or full-time-ish, as some of you will know. The chapel was built for all different Christian denominations and backgrounds and all the rest of it. It was the first, I was saying this morning to some of you, this is the first building in the country that was built like that, or at least designed for that purpose. So there is Ray, who's from Catholic chaplain, and Ruth, who's not here tonight, is the Free Church, and I'm from Church of England background. But the point is, all those denominational labels, as you discussed, don't really, we try to do as much as we can together here. There are also a whole bunch of different Christian student groups, which is also a bit confusing when you first arrive and you're trying to work out who does what. There are about 5 or 6 different groups which regularly meet here or on around the campus. This is late service. That's, as you know, you're here at Laves tonight, and so we don't run any of this. This is run by this team of people who you've got dotted around the place. And but there's a Christian Union who meets on Wednesdays. There's a group called Emmaus which meet on a Monday, and there's a Catholic Society on Thursday. There's a group called Jesus Jam meeting on Thursday, and there are 1 or 2 other little ones as well. There's a little Chinese fellowship that I think is just starting in a postgraduate. So it's a bit confusing, and I only just say that just to explain. All those groups run themselves, and they all have their own little mailing list. So if you want to be on the late service mailing list or Facebook or something, you have to join their group. You won't necessarily get on that by going to Christian Union and joining their group, and they're all kind of different. So make sure. Is that right? I don't know if you've got a mailing list or a Facebook group or something like that. Anyway, yeah. And also, we do some stuff together, as we try to do some stuff every so often where we can bring all the Christians on campus from whatever background, whatever church, whether they worship here or worship somewhere else on a Sunday. We try to do occasional things together, often socials, but also things like mission, which I might talk about later if I'm granted permission by the powers that be. So that's the kind of background to all that. Tonight I was asked to come along and speak on... What was the title again? Susa, right. Miss Susa 479BC. This is a series on obscure bits of the Bible. That's what I was told. This apparently is the least obscure bit, and it will get worse as you go along. But even I like to think that I'm reasonably okay. I had to look that up, because I didn't know where Susa was or what that was a reference to. So this was, now I know it's all kind of made a bit more sense to me, but it's going to get worse from here on in. This is all about the story of Esther, which is in the Old Testament. Just to break it down for those who don't know, about a third of the way in after Chronicles, and you've got Ezra and Nehemiah, then you've got the book of Esther. And now some of you may know all about the book of Esther. But some people here may not know anything, you may know nothing. So I want to start really just by telling the story, and I'm going to do it by using Veggie Tales, which I have discovered this week. I've been here 3 years, and so I was there in my office watching and it's fantastic. Veggie Tales do a whole Esther thing, and it's really good. I mean, I say that with surprise because, do you know one of the worst things about being Christian is there's a lot of Christian stuff which is just a bit naff. Do you know, I mean, there is a lot of naffness in Christian. And when somebody said, in America, they've made all the Bible stories using talking vegetables, I'm like, well, this is going to be one of those really, I don't think so, but actually it's really good. So we've got a couple of clips. I think the whole thing's about half an hour anyway, so we can't do the whole story, but I'm going to try and whiz through, and we've got a couple of little segments from Veggie Tales, and if you haven't seen this is just great. Let me tell you that sort of set the scene. The book of Esther is set about 5 centuries BC, so before the time of Jesus, during the time of the exile. In 587 BC, as you all know, the Babylonians came and destroyed Jerusalem. Well, they did it in several stages, and they took the Jews off into exile. and with the Babylonians. And then the Babylonians were wiped out by the Persians. The Persians came and invaded them, and some of the Jews gradually went back to rebuild Jerusalem. And you get that story in the book of Nehemiah and so on. But some of them stayed. So this is a story that is set in that time in Persia. And you've really got 4 main figures. You've got the king, King Xerxes. Do you know, I've never heard a sermon on this. That's how obscure it is. So I even know how, I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced. I've never actually heard anybody say the name. People are nodding about good to know that my 8 years full-time of studying theology didn't go to waste. King Xerxes is the Persian king, so he's your main king. You've got the hero and the heroine. The hero is a guy called Mordecai, a Jewish guy called Mordecai, who's a minor official working for the king. The heroine is Esther, who is also Jewish, who is his kind of adopted daughter. And then you've got the bad guy, the villain of the piece, a guy called Haman. So those are your sort of 4 main characters in this story. And it all opens with a banquet where they get rid of the old queen. There's a Queen Vashti, and she doesn't do what the king wants, and so he gets his advisors, and they advise him to get rid of him, on the basis that if the queen is seen to be disobeying her husband, then all the women all through the empire will start disobeying their husbands, and that will just result in chaos, won't it? So we can't have that, so they get rid of the queen. And if I'm telling, there are deliberately comic elements to this story, so it's not just me poking fun. It is, the way it is written invites that kind of comedy. So that's the point. So right, well, off with the old queen. So he needs a new queen. So they send out right across the empire, they send people out to gather in all the attractive young women, and he's going to gather them all into his harem, and then he's going to go through them all, one by one, and select the one that he fancies, and she's going to become queen. So we're going to start at that point where Esther is approached by Haman to be part of this. So there you go, that's just how it happens in the story, more or less, with a few bits of poetic life. So, Esther is taken off, and she's pampered for a year and given kind of spa treatments and beauty treatments, and then eventually she's called, and she goes before the king, and he's pleased with her. So she beats all the other contestants. That's hence the title, Miss Susa. It's kind of like a beauty competition. So she becomes the queen. And this is good news, in a way, because Mordecai now has a contact quite high up in the whole hierarchy. So when he finds out there's a plot to assassinate the king, then he tells Esther, and Esther tells the king, and this all goes to kind of Mordecai's favor. But as you can see there is already a bit of a tension between Haman and Mordecai. Haman demands that Mordecai bows down to him and acknowledges him, and Mordecai refuses to do that. So Haman hatches a plot to get rid, not just of Mordecai, but actually to get rid of all the Jewish people. So we're going to see a little song where he's hatching this plot with the king. So Haman prejudices the king against Mordecai and against all the Jews, and persuades the king to issue a decree ordering their extermination, their slaughter. It's a funny, we watch this because it's a funny kind of cartoon, and I quite like it. And there are genuine elements of comedy in the story. It's deliberately told. But, the subject is really serious. This, particularly as we read it now in the light of the Holocaust, this is about feeding anti-Semitism and feeding prejudice and the plans to exterminate the Jewish people in Persia. So you carry on in the story, and there's a lot more that happens, but the crucial kind of hinge is that, of course, Esther is right there at the center of the court. The king doesn't know that she's Jewish, but Mordecai goes to her and says, you have got to intervene. And Esther says, I can't intervene. If I even approach the king, nobody is allowed to approach the king without being summoned. If you approach the king without being summoned, you will be put to death. Unless the king just happens to choose to be merciful. But the basic rule is if you approach the king without being summoned, you will be put to death. And Mordecai says, well, you've got to do it anyway. Maybe this is why you became queen, for such a time as this. This is your task. This is why you became queen. So she plucks up courage, risking her own life, and goes to the king and intervenes, and the decree